Hey everyone! I just got my copies of the Love Deck and the Shadow Deck from the Neo Rider Tarot collection. These were introduced via Kickstarter, I think in like January or something like that. And they were all printed by around like the middle of May. And for the last couple months, they've been wending their way across the globe to everyone who had ordered them through Kickstarter. And guess what? I'm one of the people who ordered at least a couple of the decks through Kickstarter. There are a total of 4 different decks in this collection, in addition to these two, Love Deck and Shadow Deck. There is also a deck called the Antique Deck, which is black line work on a kind of parchment card, I guess, and a Royal Deck, which is a colored deck on, I guess, regular old paper. I did not get either of those 2 decks. I only got these 2 here, and that is because I have a large RWS collection, which is not really something I've ever intended to acquire. And believe it or not, I am rather picky about the RWS decks I do choose to get. So why did I get these? To be honest, it's because this one's pink and pretty. But it is because the way these 2 decks are printed is unlike any other Rider Tarot deck that I've ever seen, certainly that I've ever experienced. So let's get into that, actually. Both of these decks, let me just pull them out here. Both of these decks are printed on plastic cards, which is nice. I mean, you know, we've seen plastic decks before, but both of these use metallic effects, and they texture the metallic, I guess, inclusions in the plastic to create different effects that kind of like take the place of color. And the overall ambience, I guess, aesthetic of the deck is really quite great. So that's why I got these 2 decks. First, I do kind of actually, since I bothered to pull them out of the boxes, I want to say something about the boxes. These boxes are great. They are this kind of magnetic cardboard that's becoming quite popular. The overall effect is wonderful. The box feels very sturdy, and it is a small box, which is great for storage, but it doesn't feel cheap, which is awesome. I am a huge fan, in particular, of the one for the Love box. All the boxes for this collection are more or less the same. We've got the same design on the front and the back. The interiors, let me kind of pop these. The interiors are the same, right? It's cool that they printed on the interior, but I have to say that I really love the way it looks, particularly on the Love Deck. They've got this like silver in addition to this pink foil that's all up here, and the silver has a iridescence to it. Let me see if I can, yeah, there you go. You can kind of see how you've got this like rainbow effect. You know, we've got some reds up here and blues down here. And I think that is just absolutely charming. I would have actually really enjoyed the deck being done like that. The back, you can actually see the rainbow effect a lot more. Actually, can we get a deck like this? This is cute as all get out. I love this with the iridescent rose gold as the line work on this white background. I think that is just absolutely beautiful. So I have to admit, I am quite charmed by the Love Deck and the Love box. The Shadow Deck, you know, it also has actually kind of iridescence to it, I think. Yeah, a little bit. I don't know if it's picking up on camera, but there is an iridescent effect on this silver foiling that's kind of in there. I don't even know if it's silver foiling. It just is like, I guess it's just iridescent. Yeah, but it's a little bit more subtle on the Shadow Deck, but the effect is still really cool. So those are those 2. They do come with a guidebook. Both of them, the guidebooks are identical on the interior. They just have different covers. Come with a little bookmark. And I have to admit, I was not even going to read the guidebook because it's a guidebook. But I did actually want to see if it was rife with typos and grammatical errors and questionable diction and things to that nature. But I have to say that it isn't. I do know that this was a Chinese deck, and well, the publishers and everything behind it were Chinese, and there were some translation issues with the materials that they had on Kickstarter. There was even a really unfortunate typo for, I think, the Royal deck that Ivy actually had to come out just a couple days ago and clear up. But I haven't read this cover to cover, but every single thing that I've seen in every single entry I've read in the guidebook, I haven't found any typos or errors in that respect. So that was actually a lot better than I thought it was going to be honest. Let's get into why I thought that these two decks were worth adding to my collection. This deck is actually a lot more pink in person. I just happened to glance at my viewfinder and saw that it's coming up as a little bit more gold than it is in real life. But it is a very pretty rose gold, and it definitely lilts toward pink in real life. It's a stunner. Yeah, I chose to get this because of the way it was printed. Like I did mention before, it is on plastic cardstock, and that can feel a little flimsy to me. The overall effect with this particular deck, though, is not flimsy when you're holding the deck, because the cards themselves are actually quite thick. So when you hold it, it does feel nice and chunky and solid. Maybe when you're dealing with an individual card, it might feel a little bit more flimsy than you would expect based on its thickness. So it's more flexible is what I'm saying. But that's not really something that reads when you're holding and playing with the deck. But yeah, the way this is printed, I think it's easiest to see here on this Love deck, which is why I grabbed it first. Because the Love deck is monochromatic, there is no color in this one whatsoever. All the differences you see are completely that texture. So as I kind of move this in the light, you can see how some areas of the card pick up differently than others, and that's due to that texture. As we can see here, there's this like concentric ring thing happening in the sun. There's this like very fine line that's in through the tops of these mountains, and the stockings and the boots and here and there and that. Another type of texture that's down here. You can see that there are some other more dramatic textures, like here in the Magician, we've got this like weird checkerboard thing happening in the table. That checkerboard texture is also here in the pomegranates. You can see it there in the throne. That's the word I'm looking for, throne. The checkerboard is not the best in my opinion. Here's one that you can see where the textures start to get a little bit busy. You've got that checkerboard happening in the clouds there, but then you've also got this like barred texture in the sky. So the overall effect when you kind of stand away from it is a little Vegas bling, not gonna lie. Whenever you see those two in a card, it definitely doesn't look fantastic in my opinion. You can see both of those here in the wheel. And then I'm trying to pull the tower. Here it is. To me, the tower like gets that super busy. You can really see how that checkerboard thing in the tower itself is a bit distracting. And then you've got that other second very big texture here with the clouds, that bar texture. It's a little distracting. But I still think that the overall play of texture on these cards is really neat and not something I've seen before. And I think the cards look absolutely gorgeous in person, even though I'm not a fan of two of the textures that do play a prominent role. It really is wonderful. when I saw the promo images, I immediately backed the deck. Like, it took me like all of 2 minutes from the time I saw the promo images for the Love deck to me, you know, basically like creating a Kickstarter account, because I've never done a Kickstarter deck before. This was a new experience for me. But I thought that this deck would be an amazing thing to add to my professional reader box, which I do go out occasionally to various clients and to various events and read tarot, which is fun. And I do like to have a variety of different decks that people can choose from, because I found that a lot of people like to photograph their readings for Instagram. And I thought that this would be a really cool thing to add to that, because it's different, right? It's not going to look like all these other pictures of tarot readings that you might find on social media. But I do have to say, here now, kind of like looking through my viewfinder, I do think that there is going to be some issues with photography for this deck. You can kind of see it is picking up a lot of light and moving it around, because that's what metallics do. I should have thought about this for more than 2 minutes. And the color isn't reading true, so this might actually be a bit tricky. Yeah, you can even see there were, in certain angles, you get like this weird feedback with your camera. So this might not be the Instagram deck that I thought it would be, but it is hella gorgeous. And I am a sucker for all things pink and pretty, believe it or not. So I love the Love deck. Guess I got some plastic on my hand. All right, the other deck that I got was the Shadow deck. And as you can see, the Shadow deck is also a metallic deck. This one is a yellow gold as opposed to this rose gold, and it does incorporate color. And I figured I might as well get it, because chances are that when I opened the Love deck, I would regret not having ordered this one as well, because it is also a metallic deck. It's really cool. It does use color, which can be neat. So actually, I think this one photographs a little bit better than the Love deck. Maybe I'll add this one to my reader bag and keep the Love deck from me. But yeah, I did want to see how adding a color layer to the textured layer would make the deck look. And I have to admit, it's very successful. It is very, very successful. Let me grab that tower. Death, Star. Ah, there it is. All right, so in the Love deck, this is one of the cards that I'm not a huge super fan of, because I do find this checkerboard texture and these bars in the sky a little bit distracting. And they still are, but when you put the color on and there's other things for my eye to bounce around, I'm not just sucked into the things that I'm like, oh God, what is that? Which is a really cool effect, I have to say. So this is fun. And it's so unique. So I'm really quite happy that I've added these two decks in particular to my collection, and I think I'm gonna have fun playing with them. There are a couple things I do want to note. One is this deck is smooth. It shuffles nicely, it moves nicely, but it might move too nicely. It is a little slick, and with tarot cards being slightly bigger in general than like a standard poker deck, some people will, clients will have trouble shuffling them. And as you can see, that happens quite a bit. I'm a great card shuffler for the most part, and I'm having some trouble keeping the cards together. They do tend to jump out an awful lot because the plastics are so slick and springy that they just bounce. Yep, there goes another one. So if you are a person who has some dexterity issues, or you are going to be taking this deck to the public for reading, you need, I could have even grabbed it from that one. You do need to be aware of that. And if you are taking this deck out for some like public reading event, be counting these cards because you will be losing some. And that is a little unfortunate. So yeah, if you use this and you shuffle with it and all that other stuff, like, just be cautious. Understand that these cards are gonna go everywhere, and you're gonna need to keep count a little bit. So yeah, that's all I gotta say about that particular thing. The only other thing that I kind of want to talk about is how these images were created. The company basically took some files and vectorized them. And what that means is they ran some scans of probably black and white images through probably Adobe Illustrator, and took the standard JPEG and gave them that process called vectorization, which essentially smooths out lines, which means you can decrease or increase the size of the image without getting pixelation, which is actually quite cool and creates absolutely like wonderfully crisp art. However, I do think that it has lost some detail. Actually, let me just grab the Fool here. Like, with the Fool, maybe this isn't the best deck to show this, because this is, you know, this isn't a good deck. The Fool should have a fair bit of detail that you can make on his face. Like, we should be able to see a little, like, white in his eyeball. We should be able to see a little, like, the fact that his mouth is open, not shut. If you really have a great card, you should be able to see that the little dog has teeth, but that's pretty rare, actually. But yeah, there should just be more detail that is able to be seen in these cards. I am finding that the particular vectorization that they've done here did minimize some of the fine detail that I've come to enjoy and love in this art. I think that that is fine for the purposes of this deck. You've got plenty going on here with the different textures and whatnot that I think, like, having a lot of tiny fine detail in the art would have maybe been too much for these two decks in particular. I do feel, however, that when you remove the metallic and all the textures in the metallic, and you're just left with either the black line art or just the color, the decks might not look nearly as attractive. I think that they might, like, feel like they're missing something. That is actually why I did not order the other two decks in this. These two decks were plastic. The other two decks, the Antique deck and the Royal deck, they are printed on paper. And I feel that they basically just kind of used different file types, basically. So how do I want to explain this? Okay, we're all familiar with the concept of a Venn diagram, right? Where you've got those two circles, they overlap, and that's the thing. Man, I really wish I grabbed some paper. Anyway, I think that the Neo Rider Tarot collection is basically creating 4 decks through 3 different effects. You've got a metallic effect with texture, you've got a color effect, and you've got a line art. When you have the deck with just the line art, you have the Antique deck. When you have the deck with just the color effect, you have the Royal deck. When you add color plus texture, you get the Shadow deck. When you do line work plus texture, you get the Love deck. Does that make sense? So because the artwork on these is more simplified, I feel that if you took away the metallic texture, the cards would just read a little bit, you know, a little bit maybe more boring or less detailed. The colors might look a little bit off because you know, adding the metallics and texture kind of brightens up and livens up a card. So I was just, you know, worried that the other two decks might not meet my expectations. However, seeing these two decks firsthand and how much I like them and whatnot, I'm actually rather sorry I didn't get the other two decks in the Neo Rider collection. So I'm gonna probably be on the lookout for those. If anybody has them and wants to, you know, rehome them, give me a call. I would love to see them. So yeah, I guess I'll keep an eye out for copies of the Royal deck and the Shadow deck. Probably used, because I don't want to wait another like 2 months for things to ship from China, but that's okay. All right, thank you so much for hearing me ramble on about my Neo Rider decks. I love them. I hope that you think that they're pretty cool too, and have a wonderful day.